Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Stoughton Deli. I'm Aaron Rand, along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette, and our special guest today, Montreal weather icon, Lori Grain. Lori, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let me begin by, of course, giving you what every guest on the Corner Booth receives, which is an I Love Quebec #notwithstanding t-shirt.
Love
so
it.
That's for you.
Thank you. I will wear it proudly.
It almost makes
Thank
retiring
you.
worth it, doesn't it?
There you
Yeah.
go. Lovely parting gift.
So,
And before I just have to, before we even start, give us a weather forecast.
no, Bill, that's right.
Come on,
Bill.
give us a weather
Bill.
I
forecast.
knew he was going to do this to me.
And you're not even, and you're wearing
And
green, and there's no green screen.
Well,
and
I
you
know.
can-
I did that
yeah,
for you, Bill.
yeah,
I
thank
wore the
you. I
green for
appreciate
you.
that.
I wore green on my last for my last CTV
Yeah.
party with flowers, which would have been a green screen nightmare, but I just did it to, make Bill happy.
Yeah, thank you.
And to prove the point in
That
his
you-
Gazette article that I can now wear green, and here I am. But yeah, we actually have a special weather statement in place.
I
Bill,
know
I'm
that.
happy you
How do
asked.
you know that? You're not doing this anymore.
She knows.
know,
She
but
knows.
Special
I
She's
weather.
on
can't
top
help
of it. She
it.
can't help it. It's in her
What, do you
blood.
get up in the morning first thing and check the weather?
I
board?
do.
She does.
It's
It's
still-
in her
it's in
bones.
my DNA.
You could call Lori up at any point in time, and she'll give you a
The weather?
forecast. Still, and you know what? That's a great idea. You could have a little
My
phone-in
own phone line?
service.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Dial a forecast.
That- but I
Great
gotta
idea.
say, since you're gone, the weather gods have not taken it well, because we have seen torrential rains. We have seen the heat dome,
Yes.
an expression I never even knew existed. Have you ever used that expression?
We have used that in the past, but people like it when there's new weather lingo. When we first introduced polar vortex, it was not
Oh, that's
like
right.
that just
That's right, yeah.
was created, but people like new weather lingo, so we like to make the people
Like
happy.
El Nino and La
La
Nina.
Nina.
Yeah.
But it's been madness, our weather. I mean, it's cold, it's hot, it's
Bill.
like
But we're
rain.
used to that.
Bill, this happens all the time.
No,
We're
not
used to
not.
that.
Are we used to that?
We are, and the weather, it changes so much here. We have everything. Of course, last week we had the heat wave
Yes,
in
and then
place, the
torrential
heat dome.
rains.
Then we had over 50 millimeters of rain on the weekend.
Which is
Now we've got-
unusual.
Then yesterday it cooled down. It almost felt like a fall day.
Yeah.
We've got more rain on the way this weekend, but the forecast for Canada
Oh,
Day
no.
is sunny and 25. So
And that wraps up another edition of the Corner Booth.
thank you for
Okay.
having me.
I had to bring you in without a green screen.
I feel like I'm right back where I was.
I didn't want to talk weather because there's so much more to talk about career-wise. So
Yeah.
you kind of decided, I don't know when you decided, but you announced a little less than a month ago that you'd be retiring after roughly 25 years, right, doing
Yeah,
this?
over 25
25
years.
Which is insane because I've known you, I think, probably not long after you actually
Yeah.
started.
Well,
and I
we
still
all
think
knew
you're like
each other
30
at
years
the
old.
beginning there.
Thank you.
But
I still feel like I am.
Let's talk about that. First of all, anyone who lives in Montreal knows who you are. Besides just doing the weather, you're a community event. You're very involved and have been for a long time in the community. So what brought you to the decision?
I think it's something that I've been thinking of for quite a while. I knew for a long time that, I obviously wasn't going to stay in that position forever and ever and ever. But I felt more and more that what I really wanted to do was serve really my community, but in a more tangible way, more concrete, being really involved, sort of really rolling up my sleeves and getting involved. And I think a lot of that changed. And I know you were talking, recently to Ken Connors, and he said how he started to contemplate during the pandemic. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
people started to think of things in a very different way during the pandemic. I think, we were so isolated during that time. I started to do weather at home. It didn't even feel like I was really doing television. I set up my iPad, and my iPhone in my house on
Yeah.
a tripod, and that's how I was doing weather. So technology was great because it enabled us to continue to do our jobs. It allowed us to stay connected somewhat. But it also, during that time, we were really, really separated from each other. And I could just really see how we really needed community more than ever. And when we were allowed to come back together, even though I was going back into CTV and going back into the station, things had changed. We were in our little boxes. We weren't out anymore as much in the community, doing community events. And that's really what my heart is. That's, sort of in my DNA is to, to connect with people. I'm a people person. It's what I love to do. I love to be out in the community. I love to talk to people, to meet people, and help people. And I always felt I was able to do that with the profile that I had, was to be involved in community events and community initiatives. And so, that wasn't really happening anymore because of the resources, the lack of resources that we had.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and so...
Well, like the late, great Don McGowan, who was very similar to you, and he did reach out, but there were the resources, and he was involved in all sorts of aspects of the community, and another weather icon in the city.
Absolutely.
And the fact is, you're right. I mean, you were best known to the city, yes, for your weather, but for reaching out into the community, as was Don and as have been all the great ones. And I see your point there.
A lot of the footage that they showed as I was leaving was footage that we shot when I was actually out in the community. We did the ice bucket challenge, in Greenfield Park,
right.
And we had so many community members there supporting us during that time. I rappelled down the side of a building for disabled children, and we had a crowd of people gathered at the base of that skyscraper, cheering me on as I did
they
that.
were there to catch you.
Yeah. It was only afterwards that my boss said, maybe that wasn't a good idea to do that on live television. It could have gone very badly, but fortunately everything went really, really well. When we did celebrity weather, all those times where we had people come in, I mean, that was really, those were the best
And people
moments,
could go
the
into the
best
building
times.
after COVID,
I get the part about you being a people person. I think that's very obvious from very, very early on. And I'm just going to ask a question to what you said a minute ago, which was, you thought to yourself, I can't see myself doing this forever. So we've both been in the business a long time. When you start thinking that way, why? I mean, what you did, you could have done it with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
What made you think, I don't want to do this forever? I don't think, because you could have done it forever. No one was going to say, hey, Lori Graham, you have to leave. So what was that about?
I think, again, I really felt, my faith has always been important to me, and it is becoming more and more important to me. And so it wasn't a decision that I felt I was making. I felt it was a decision, something that was being asked of me. And so that was very different. So it was more a question of, Lori, do you trust me? I've given you this great career, these 25 years on the air, and you've had a great run here, but I almost felt like now God was asking me to use the gifts, the talents that he's given me to serve him in a different way.
So a calling.
So going from a career to a calling, and I really felt this was something that was being asked of me. And for the longest time, I said, okay, you've given me this great platform, but I'm not holding on to it with tight hands, because I realize that anything that we have can come and go very easily. Jobs come and go, people come and go. So whatever you've given me, I hold on to it with open hands. And whenever you want me to move somewhere else, I'm willing to move. And I kept sort of checking in, like, oh, okay, is this the time? Is this the time? During COVID, when I was at home doing weather by myself and not connecting with people, I thought, maybe this is the time. This is the time that he wants me to move somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then going back into the station, I said, okay, is this the time? And then during this recent round of layoffs back in February, I thought, okay, this is...
And we should make clear, by the way, this is your own volition.
Yes, absolutely. That I felt it was being asked of me, and the timing was clear.
Yeah.
And it, my husband and I have been part of a group that helped to launch a new English church on the South Shore. Our first service was the first Sunday of March. And I walked into my boss's office the last week of February. I didn't even know that I was going to have that conversation with him. And I had my radio on. I was listening to a podcast, and a message was on, and it said, sort of at the end of your life, what is it that you want?
That wasn't our podcast, obviously.
not the corner booth one, but what is it that you want God to say to you? Is that you want him to say, well done, good and faithful servant. And so as I drove into work that day, I had tears streaming down my face, because I thought, okay, I see what you're saying to me, that this is now time to move into a new season for something that he has prepared for me in advance. And so when I walked into Chris's office and I sat down, and he was like, okay, so, we're thinking of the future, and this is what we're
Yeah.
going to do, and this is where we're going
Hold
to
the
go. And I
press,
said,
yeah.
hang on just one second. I think, this is going to be the end of the line for me. I know he was in shock. I was kind of in shock myself because I didn't realize
We were
that
all in
I was
shock.
going to have that
Yeah.
conversation. But then that weekend, when we started that new service, I really felt that, it was the right thing.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowden Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the home of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowden Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowden Delicatessen.
Interesting, but people with larger egos, I know that's unheard of in the television business, would never have left because, and I know in your case, you've been offered jobs places. You've been flown down to Los Angeles. You could have had a weather job anywhere in the universe.
Can I
if
just
you
stop?
wanted.
Thank you for bringing this up. I've said this to you before, and I know it's embarrassing sometimes for you because, faint praise and all. Years ago, you've got to remember this, we were approached to do something to co-host a wedding something or other video, and we sat there getting ready to go on, and I said to you, and I didn't know you well enough probably to have said this, but I felt like I did. I said, Lori, I consider you to be the greatest talent as far as doing a weather forecast of anyone I have ever seen.
Yeah.
U.S. here, anywhere in the
Yeah.
world. You could have picked up a phone and gone to work in New York,
She
LA,
didn't have to
anywhere.
pick up a phone. She
But
was
exactly.
offered jobs.
But you could have.
She won't
and I
talk
looked
about
at
it,
you,
but
to
she-
Bill's point, when you're in this business, sometimes your head begins to swell.
Yeah.
You're thinking, I could work in another market. I could make 10 times as much money as I do here. Yet you never did.
No.
You had the opportunity.
Because I
to
needed
do
Aaron
this.
Rand as my
No,
agent. No.
Seriously.
You didn't need
why
anybody as an agent. I know darn well that many people reached out to you. And to Aaron's point, absolutely correct. You could have got a job anywhere in North America.
And 9 out of 10 people would have.
Yeah.
And I'm curious why you never did.
Yeah.
I've always felt so much a part of this city. I love Montreal. I grew up here. I grew up listening to CJAD, watching Pulse News, back in
Yeah.
the day. And so when I started to work at CJAD and I started to work at now CTV, I really felt that it was home. I remember being in school, being at Concordia University, and people saying, if you want to get a job, first of all, there are no jobs, and they were saying this way back when. And they said, if you want to get a job, you're going to have to go off to some remote
Work your
community
way up.
somewhere,
Kenora.
and pay your dues
Yeah,
and work your
yeah,
way up.
yeah.
And I thought, okay, if this is what I have to do, this is what I'm willing to do. And in my second year of university, I started working at CJAD, and I could not believe the luck that I had to be there. And
You have some great stories from there. Referendum. What was one of your like you walked in the middle of like the referendum political campaign and all the rest?
Yeah, in my second year of university, I applied for what they had at the time was the Alcali Award, and
Right.
it was a radio award that was given out. I wasn't even going to apply for it because I thought, I'm only in my second year. They're probably going to give it to a third-year student. But a friend of mine said, you know what, Lori, if you don't apply, you'll never know. And I thought that's great advice. Now, thank God I got that early on. But anyways, she said, if you never apply, you'll never know. So I thought, well, if anything, it'll be good experience for next year. So I applied for the award. I ended up winning it. I went into CJAD to do an internship for a week. Walked into the newsroom, was just in total awe, hearing all the voices and then seeing all the faces of these legends that I grew up listening to. I could not believe that I was there.
I guess Aaron wasn't there then.
Just missed me.
But like the George Balkans
Right.
and Gordon
Blackman.
Sinclairs and Ted Blackman and Victor Narenberg,
Yeah.
who I got to work with in the newsroom, Claude Beaulieu, Derek Conlon, Melanie King, all these amazing voices, and thought, wow, and here I am, little Lori Graham from the West Island. What am I doing here? How did I get here? And then shortly after, Gord called me up and said, hey, kid, what do you know about traffic? And I thought, I'm on the phone with Gord. And I started to work there in the summertime. Then I started to do reporting and news anchoring. And yes, I was there during the 95 referendum. And my shift started, I had the evening shift and into the overnight. But, the speeches were still happening. And at 11:30 was my first newscast. And a much more senior reporter came over and said, do you want me to go in? Do you want me to take this? And secretly I was like, yes, I do, because what am I doing here? And I don't know where the confidence came from, but I said, no, it's okay. I'll do it. and it's almost like you have what are you doing? And anyway.
You say you did.
No, I want to go, but tell me the end of that story.
So
you
I,
go
I,
on,
wa-
you
I
do the
walked
news-
into the booth and I was sitting there and I was listening to the speeches, and once the speeches were wrapping up, I had to summarize, because I was the news anchor that night, and summarize what was being said, summarize what was happening. Of course, we had a panel, so that they would go to the panel, but it was a sink or swim moment, almost like the ice storm when I started in television.
Right.
Started working at CTV, and boom, the ice storm hits, and here I am thinking, my goodness. Not only is the weather the lead news story, but this is making international news. And now here I am as a young reporter covering one of the biggest weather stories still our province has ever seen, our country has ever seen. And getting that call from Lloyd Robertson, being out in the field and asking for the weather forecast and thinking, what am I doing
So
here?
you had a couple of baptisms of fire,
Absolutely.
as they say, right?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
You
yes.
managed to, it's funny you use the word confidence, because I think that's the one thing that exudes from you more than anything else, at least in my opinion. I said you do stuff effortlessly, but that's because you're confident enough to be able to do it. And I always wonder, because I know your background, coming up in radio and then starting in TV. Most people who become weather people love the weather. They always wanted to know more about the weather. That's not your background, though. That's not how you
It
started.
became her background.
Yeah, that's it. I studied broadcast journalism. I really thought that I was going to be a reporter. I thought I was going to be a news anchor. And when the position opened at CTV to do weather, I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. And I did have a science background.
Right.
So it actually turned out that the science background fit beautifully with the broadcast journalism training. And the more I studied weather, the more I developed a passion for it. And I realized how much people talk about the weather, that it became a passion of mine. And now I talk about it all the time and still think about it all the time. And
Wait, are you saying there's science involved in weather? That's no.
But
Maybe we need to stop
way are
at
the
this
winds
point. I
blowing?
didn't know that was
But
the case.
Laurie, maybe you didn't have to go off to Kenora or Wabush to pay dues, but you did pay dues. What you didn't mention in all this, and I know full well, when you were doing late night radio, you were
yes.
also working some 18-hour days at the time, like as a reporter, as a weather person, as a traffic person, and all the rest. I mean, it didn't come like as easy as you make it.
well, that's
So-
it. That first year, I mean, I never wanted to say no to anything.
Sure.
So anytime somebody asked me to do something, it was yes. So that first year I was working in radio, working at CJAD. I was doing morning traffic, so I would wake up at 4:30 in the morning, get to the station, do traffic from 6 to noon. And when I started working at CTV, I was on the air at 6 o'clock in the evening. On weekends, I would do 6 o'clock and late weather till 11:30. I was on till midnight, and then Monday morning up again early 4:30 in the morning. And I did that for almost a year.
Not
Nice to
even
be-
you would
I-
ever do
Nice to
that.
be young. huh?
Well, that's it. Again, I look back and I think, how did I do that? And then every once in a while on a Monday night, Monday nights at Mix 96 back in the day, they had a show called The Love Line, and they would ask me to host it.
Okay.
And so I would go on, and again, 10 to midnight Monday night. So I would be up till midnight Sunday night doing weather, up till midnight Monday night doing weather, and then up early in the morning, 4:30 in the morning doing traffic. And
You paid your dues.
I guess so.
Yes,
I guess I did.
yeah.
I got a lot of experience.
And the moral of
loved
the
it.
story is, say yes to a lot of things
Say
if you want to
yes.
get ahead.
Well,
Because
try everything.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah,
say. Try
yeah.
everything at least once. And,
no, it's an inspirational story.
and I did get to do some really exciting things also doing weather, because I did get to go to Toronto. So that was a fun experience working on Canada AM, working on your morning. I also got to host our weekend national morning show, Good Morning Canada.
Right.
So that was a rotating show that would go to different cities. Different cities would host it. And when it came to Montreal a few times, I got to host it here in the city. And it was a great way for us to showcase Montreal to the rest of Canada. We went to Quebec City. We showcased everything happening in the city during the summer. Got to do some great interviews with really great Montrealers. So we got to do a little bit of everything, which was
You kind
wonderful.
of said before, you sometimes pinch yourself to realize how successful you've been and what this trip has been like. And I'm sure even now, it's only been like 3 weeks or a month, you do that sometimes and think back, wow, I can't believe I did all this and how lucky I've been.
Totally. And when we had CTV threw a beautiful party for me
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago, and they were showing all these pictures of things I had done over my career, and one of the pictures that came up was a shot of myself and Ellen DeGeneres. And I had introduced her at the Bell Center, and somebody said, "Oh wow, you met Ellen?" And it was almost like, "Oh yeah, I forgot I did that." There have been so many wonderful moments that sometimes you forget just how blessed you are to have met great people, to have been in these privileged
But it's not an
positions.
accident, because you're one of the most likable people. I've never heard anybody say anything bad, whether a member of the public, people you've worked with, like people we've worked with together, we've done stuff together. No one has ever, if you have something bad to say about Laurie Graham, you don't deserve to be on this planet. But it's true. And I know a ton of like media people, and let's just say not everybody has that cachet where everybody.
What are you saying?
Well, Aaron, nobody likes it. No. No, but the fact is that nobody. Have you ever heard anybody say a bad thing
No.
about Laurie?
But for
And I
good
hear-
reason.
Yeah.
For good reason, and the reason is you're as what you are.
And she
what
has
you
no
seem
ego.
is actually what
She's
you
just-
are.
yeah.
You're not putting on anything. This is you.
I don't feel like I have reason to do that. I still feel like
Yeah.
I'm that West Island kid, really, that grew up. I mean, I think of the way that I was raised. I think of my parents and the way that they raised me. Yes, my parents were really proud of me when I started working at CJAD and CTV, but I really feel that I have been blessed, and I really felt that I was blessed to be a blessing to others. And so when I realized that my job had a greater meaning and a greater purpose because I was able to help people and showcase what they were doing and use my platform for good, that's what I wanted to do.
I will point out, I think the list might have been in your column. Again, what you see on the screen is someone who's always smiling, always happy, living, what looks like a dream life. But you went through a bit of a tough time in your life at one point.
Yeah.
It's not all fairy tales and rainbows, right?
And you were very candid about that
Yeah.
with me, and I knew from the past too. And that's worth mentioning as well. Like, I mean, you have seen the dark side of life, although it never came across on television, because if people didn't know you, they never would have guessed. But that must have.
And I think that's another reason why I'm being called to do something else now, is because people can look at somebody on television and see how smiley and happy they are and think, wow, their life must be perfect. And people's lives are not perfect. And we do go through difficulty and face challenges. And in my darkest moment, and I think that's really when I realized that my platform was to be used for others. I read a book that had a profound impact on my life. And when I opened that book years ago, the first line of that book is, "It's not about you." And I guess in that moment, I was not ready to read that book because I was like, well, it kind of is. And I closed that book and I put it back on the shelf and I thought, I'll get around to reading that one day. But in my deepest despair and time of need, I reopened that book and read that line, "It's not about you," and that really
Resonated.
transformed and shaped the way I started to see life, and then realized, what? Part of getting out of this, sort of dark area is how I'm looking at life and how I need to use my life to serve others.
So with respect to serving others, you mentioned now you and your husband, and you met your husband at church.
At church, I know. And I think a lot of people have this, conception, church, little old ladies, drinking tea. And I just want to say, I'd love for people to come to our church because it's a great place, great community. We have amazing community there. We do so much in the community. And New Life Church, I'm just going to give them a plug. Right now we're meeting on the first Sunday of the month, getting all of our volunteers and everything in place. But really, I think this is what I'm being called to do, is to serve there in a concrete way, to show people the hope that I found and to share that with them.
You know what I appreciate, Laurie, is the fact that we work in one of the most cynical businesses, if not the most cynical business of all. And the fact, what I admire about you is the fact that most people that have come to your realization would keep that quiet because for perceptions or for whatever, and you're right out front with it, and people respect you even more so. But I don't know if that many people would be forthcoming about their spiritual beliefs.
I think when you feel like something saved you, when something changed you, transformed you, restored you, then you want to share that with others because you want other people to know that there is hope for you too. And I think that's why I feel so passionate about it. That's why I want to spend my life serving in that way, because I know that there are a lot of people that are hurting, that are suffering. We saw it during the pandemic. We continue to see what a crazy world we're living in, but there is hope, and that hope is an anchor for people's soul. And that's really what I want to share. That's the message that I want to get out there.
And I think we can both agree, I know that you doing this, your next calling, if you will be as good as you were doing what you've done for the last 25 years.
But as long as I can call you for an instant weather forecast.
Absolutely, anytime.
Are you wearing green a lot now, or just for me?
I did this for you, Bill, but I think I may add more green to my wardrobe.
We have to wrap up. I just want to point one thing out. You can tell me if you thought about this at all, because I think for you, doing what you want to do now, and that's wonderful, that's something you need to do. Have you given any thought to the idea of working as a coach to people coming up in the industry, from someone who's done what you have done so well for so many years? And you obviously you could help people like that. Has that crossed your mind at all? You've been asked?
Well, you know what? Years ago, Robert Viro had a radio and television school, and he had asked me if I would come and teach his students. And I loved doing that. I loved shaping and molding young people and seeing them grow and helping them in their careers. I absolutely loved it. So it is something that I would consider, because I love teaching and I love helping. It is something I would consider. Right now, I mean, I'm serving in one way, but who knows?
No, but you could do more. You've done more than one thing in your life all the time, so I'm thinking perhaps add that to the schedule. Okay. As your manager, I'm telling you, you need to do this. People need to have you help them achieve what they need to achieve in this business.
And I would be more than happy.
Laurie, we're out of time. I thank you so much for joining us today. By the way, we never held this up at all. So this is the book they gave you, right?
Yes, this is. So CTV, I mean, they just did an extraordinary job in celebrating the career that I had over 25 years. In my last week on air, I could not believe all of the beautiful video tributes. I mean, they really dug deep.
Yeah.
They reached out from the National Assembly to the Prime Minister in Ottawa, and then they presented me with this beautiful album, photos over my 25-year career with comments from viewers. So I want people to know that, because they actually extended that invitation for people to write in if they had any words of wisdom or comments that they wanted to share. And so many viewers wrote in, and they are all in this book. So I just want to say thank you to the viewers, to the listeners who have supported me all these years, for all of the just the wishes. And I will carry you all with me in my heart forever, and I will cherish this. This is going to be on our coffee table at home for all to see, and I am definitely going to pick it up and look at it often.
Laurie, congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And
Thank
look
you
forward
for
to seeing
your
you again
time
soon.
served.
You bet.
Time served.
Time served. That wraps up another edition of the Corner Booth here from the Stoughton Deli Restaurant. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.